Hello, and welcome to The Ticket, the podcast where we explore the cutting edge of customer service and support. I'm Bobby Stapleton, Senior Director of Human Support here at Intercom. In today's episode, we're diving into the bold strategies that can drive significant transformation and innovation within a company. Our guest is John Rossman, an early Amazon executive who played a key role in launching the Amazon Marketplace in 2002. John's the author of 4 books, including the bestseller, The Amazon Way, and Big Bet Leadership. John is a leading authority on leveraging digital transformation and innovative business models to achieve exceptional results. Today, we'll explore his latest book and how leaders in customer service can use generative AI to spark creative problem solving, enhance decision-making, and drive exceptional customer experiences. John, welcome to the show.
Bobby, thanks for having me.
So let's jump right into it. Your book, Big Bet Leadership, is about making bold, high-stakes decisions that can transform a business. Just to start, could you define what Big Bet Leadership is and share what inspired you to focus on this concept?
Yeah, that's a big question, but a really important one. So a big bet gets called many things within a company. It can be a growth strategy. It can be a cost model restructuring. It can be an AI strategy. It can be a replatforming. But at its heart, a big bet has 2 critical aspects to it that differentiate it from an incremental or typical type of scenario. And those 2 attributes are, first, it has ambition. It has the potential for dramatic improvement to the customer experience, to the business. But the second set of attributes come with it, which is it's high risk. It has lots of unknown unknowns, lots of dependencies, lots of things that are difficult to predict up front, right? And so you have this dual tension in the system, high ambition, but lots of risks. We know that these types of transformations have an incredible failure rate, right? Like anywhere from 70 to 95%. You know, there are stats that say 1 in 6 digital transformations have no benefit at all. And so fundamentally, as companies, as teams, as leaders, we know we aren't good at these types of big changes, but we need to do them, right? In fact, they're more important than ever. And that's the setup thesis of the book, The Hyperdigital Era, which is to stay competitive, to maintain or increase your competitive advantage, you actually need to develop transformation as a core capability. Clearly, it's not today. And so that is why we wrote Big Bet Leadership, is to help leaders do a specific part of their job, and what I think is a growing importance of their job, which is to not just be a great operational leader, but to actually be a leader who has a system for how you define, drive, and execute these high potential, high risk situations that we call big bets.
That's really helpful, and I feel like that framework can apply to so many things. I would love to hear, is there anything you would add for how this can apply to leaders who are in customer service?
Well, yeah, I mean, depending upon the business, customer service is the critical interface to customers about the brand, right? And I think being highly connected to what is our brand promise and how do we deliver against that every single day, and being the voice and the authority, not just of maybe the customer service interaction, but in general, our brand, and being the steward of our brand is an incredible opportunity and obligation for customer service leaders. So, you know, I've always believed in kind of coloring outside the lines. In fact, in the Amazon Way, I tell a pretty funny story about Bezos kind of getting on me about hey, your job title might be this, but you need to act as an owner and think of running the entire marketplace business. Act as if you do run it, John, and everything, right? And that would be, kind of the both the opportunity and what organizations need is there's times when you have to be the functional leader, but there's more time when you need to be just an owner and think big for the business. And I think that the customer service leader has an incredible lens to do that through.
That's really well said. I'm sure it will resonate with all the customer support folks listening. You emphasize that many big bets fail due to a lack of clarity in leadership. In your view, like what are some of the key factors that leaders in customer service need to consider before placing a big bet, especially if they're adopting a new technology like AI?
Yeah. So I get invited into lots of companies to do some sort of, QA review or a pressure test of a current digital transformation or something going on. And what I ask to do is send me the documentation, like the history of the documentation about this initiative. And then I go and interview, 8 to 15 of their leaders, but I interview them individually. And I ask, in essence, 2 questions. I ask, tell me the problem that this initiative is solving, and tell me how it actually works at the end. Like not the vague things, but tell me like how will it actually work at the end? And I'm telling you, a third of the people I interview won't be able to even answer the question. They'll just like, I don't know, and everything, right? And 2/3, they'll answer the question, but they won't give just like vaguely similar answers. They'll get distinctly different answers. And that is fundamentally where we start in Big Bet Leadership. It's not the entire playbook. It's the setup. If you don't have this up front, you really are going to have a difficult time in succeeding. And this is the attribute of clarity, right? What problem are we solving and what is our hypothesis, hinting that it's a bet, like we're not sure, but we think this is the hypothesis about what the killer feature is, what it looks like going forward, and what are the high-risk operational capabilities required in order to do that. We call that fundamental framework the Big Bet vector, right? A vector has 2 very specific points, and it's actually going someplace very specific. It's not just randomized kind of speed or energy. It's actually going someplace. And if you can have that Big Bet vector to start with and use it over the life cycle of the Big Bet, you have the setup, you have the foundation for being successful at that. Again, that's like the entry level to the playbook. But if you don't have it, these things are really difficult to achieve. So it starts with creating clarity.
Yeah, and you mentioned there that like I forget the exact term from the book. That like the main feature. What was it called? It was like that, like the killer feature. You were talking about
the killer feature.
Yeah, the killer feature. And I would love to hear like how's the killer feature kind of fit into the framework?
In trying to create this type of clarity and like digging deeper, like what's the customer really want? What's the real problem? Like oftentimes we're oriented to all these little pain points along the way and everything, right? And those are hints, those are important clues, but it doesn't get at the deeper need. And so what we encourage you to do is to get to the real suck, right? Like we frame it as the what sucks of either the customer situation and or the operational situation. And if you frame it as like, but what really sucks? It gets you to much more of a root cause, right? It gets you deeper into the situation. And if you can't frame exactly like what is the real customer problem we're trying to solve with, then you don't have a real aspirational goal. You're just like making some little fixes along the way, which might be okay in some circumstances, but that's not transformational, right? These are different than an incremental project. So framing something as the real what sucks, and then saying, what would be the true solution? We call it as the killer feature. You can call it the lovable feature. You can call it lots of different things. I had a healthcare client who was like, John, we're not going to call it the killer feature here. That may not be the right terminology for it and everything, right? So we called it the lovable feature. That's all good. And getting to that type of problem and solution, well, then what that allows you to do is to debate it, right? And the cheapest experimentation you can do is actually writing things out and then debating them as a team. That is true experimentation. We built this approach off of Amazon's working backwards process, right? Which is a narrative written, debate-oriented. We reversed engineered it specifically for these high potential, high risk situations. And we have a very prescriptive set of memos and a way to approach doing this type of active debate-oriented experimentation before you start building. People are so eager to let's start prototyping and doing all these things. And they get again, that creates the sea of ambiguity, the fog of like, yeah, we're going someplace, but we don't really know. If you can debate up front and have your thesis of what it is that we're solving, or a couple of challenger theses, right? Then you can set those up for experimentation, right? Then we can experiment correctly on them and let them do what they should do, which is you should learn, you should adjust, you should prove these things out before you make big commitments.
Yeah, and that really resonates. I imagine for many support leaders, we have so much on our plates. You're getting pulled in all these different directions. There's often a long list of customer pain points. So having this framework of like really prescriptive, what sucks, what are we trying to solve, what do we think is this killer feature that can be the solution here? Having that simplicity and having the structure is a great way for going about tackling problems. So can you give an example of how AI could be used to help identify or validate a big bet when it comes to CS?
Yeah, it can be pretty transformative. And so if you think about the value chain or the life cycle of any type of problem solving, right? Like you kind of have problem identification and framing, and then you have kind of solution generation, and then you have kind of execution, and you have communication, you have testing, and you have rollout and metrics and everything. Well, AI can be a thought partner through that entire process, but it actually works so much better if you combine, Gen AI, so call it, ChatGPT. If you combine ChatGPT with a specific framework for how you're doing this work, right? So one of the things we did with the book, we created a Big Bet GPT. So it takes the framework of Big Bet leadership and helps a user do that process in the context of Big Bet leadership. It's not the right tool for every circumstance, but it can, if you understand what you're doing, which is what you get through reading the book, then it can really be a very powerful tool. So, and you add to that the specifics of your situation. I've got a client who's launching a manufactured product, and we did it to both radically reinvent the customer experience, but also drive cost model improvement for him, and created a ton of tension in doing that. Like, we were able to do that work at a tenth of the effort and the duration that a normal set of analyses would have taken. And so that's how AI, through this transformation, one of the things it's really powerful at is communication. I think, we always think that the technology is the hard part of these transformations, and it is hard, but it's not the hardest part, right? Communicating and bringing others along an authentic, honest journey of here's the problem we're solving and here's where we're going through. The process is going to be an experimentation-based process. Like, that type of communication is critical to being successful at it. We have a whole chapter dedicated to being the chief repeating officer. Well, AI can be, a really powerful communication analyst for you in writing and scripting these, as long as you do the upfront work of defining these problems that you're solving.
I was very excited to see the ChatGPT that you built. I downloaded it today. I was using it for one of the initiatives we're working on with my team, restructuring our whole inbox model. And so that's available to everybody. You should read the book, but you should check that out too. And again, it's just this really great way to not only be using AI to help, again, guide your thinking, but just really, again, great proof point for the technology. So, and also in the book, you talk about the importance of managing risk and ambiguity. How can leaders in CS effectively go about navigating that uncertainty when they're trying to make these big decisions, when there might be a lot of stakeholders involved, or they're navigating, constantly changing technology like generative AI?
It starts with bringing your peers and the executive leadership team along. Like, you have to gain alignment, because these things aren't typically isolated, changes that are being made, right? Like, just within customer service. They tend to impact upstream and downstream in every aspect of the organization. So you need to do a really good job at bringing that leadership team along and helping them understand the nature of the journey that you're along. Because, my co-author, Kevin McCaffrey, he said, it's like, there's nothing as great for your career as being a leader or participating in one of these big bets. But there's nothing quite as tricky as being participating in one of these big bets and it doesn't go quite right? So these are not just high stakes situations for companies, they're high stakes situations for people's career. So managing those is really, really important. Well, we have a couple of specific exercises and suggestions in how you do that as a leader with your peer group and the executive team. And a quick example of that is, instead of doing what typically happens, which is, we present a presentation that is a compelling story of here's what we're doing and here's where we're going. Aren't you all in agreement to this and everything, right? Well, that's a really hard homework assignment to give to somebody who's not day to day in the business, right? And so, the CFO maybe has some questions, but they kind of like, let's see what happens, right? And the COO kind of goes, yeah, I maybe have some concerns, but, I don't feel like speaking up right now. And the CIO is like, I'm not quite sure how this fits into our roadmap, but, now is not the time to do that, right? Like, that's what happens. And you haven't done the job you're really there to do. You're not there to sell the concept. You're there to elicit response and participation. And at some point, we share a common vision and commitment to this transformation. Well, the way that we suggest you do this better is what we call the 3 Futures memo. And what the 3 Futures memo is each memo no more than 2 pages. And it's a slightly different version of the same transformation. And by having those contrasts, and people have to read them, and then they have to tell you which of these would you recommend, and for the other 2, what would have to be different? What would have to be true for you to recommend those 2? Well, now you're really helping them do their job, and you're making it easy for them to be critical. That's what you want. You want critical thinking on this concept. So that's a way that a leader can bring along their peers in an executive group and essentially syndicate the decision-making that needs to go on around this.
That all makes sense. And what would you tell our listeners who are like, John, I hear you, that sounds great. I feel like I'm strapped for time, or I may only have a short minute to work on this. Like, how would you recommend using this framework while also balancing the need for speed? That sounds dumb, but also balancing the need for speed and being quick.
Well, I'd say if you're not willing to address that fundamental challenge, then don't go into this business of transformation, and everything, right? Like, because you are purely operating from a minute-to-minute incremental basis. Hard problems take dedicated thinking and time to think about them and to debate them. So what I'd recommend you do is rationalize your calendar, right? Like how many of these meetings are really either creating a decision or creating an idea? Or how many of them are just like, we just meet to meet, and everything, right? And so rationalize your calendar and create dedicated time to work on it. Then you have the right environment. There's a couple of books that I think really tell this story. One's Essentialism, and it really is like you can't work on hard, subtle problems in this interrupt-driven environment. The one appendix we did in Big Bet Leadership is called Why Memos, and it's the research behind why working in memos, why writing things out in narrative form is such a satisfying and impactful way to do things versus all the truncated thinking that we do in Slack and email and the laziness that we do in meetings, which isn't really getting at a hard decision. You don't want consensus on these types of situations. You want the best thinking on these situations. Lots of times consensus is the right model to have. But on these things, you actually need the best concepts to win. The way to do that is by writing them out and debating them again.
And I imagine for many support folks, that can often be the blocker. Again, sitting down, getting some of this on paper, or again, knowing where to even start. And so having this framework or having the GPT prompts to help guide it is just another easy way to really remove that blocker and move things along. So awesome. Well, as someone who played a key role in launching Amazon Marketplace, big fan, by the way, what lessons from that experience can be applied to the current challenges of digital transformation and innovation that are going on right now in customer service?
A few things. So, the book is based off this fundamental belief that systematic transformational leaders have three habits. They create clarity, they maintain velocity, they accelerate risk and value, deferring out other things until it's proven. Well, we exercised all of those habits in launching the marketplace business. We deferred out so many things that could have been done up front, but we're like, no, let's get the true, like, minimally lovable product out there, and then we'll backfill with all of this work that needed to be done. So that was part of it. But I think the bigger thing from Amazon and from the marketplace launch, so the marketplace business in 2002, that was the third iteration of some type of third-party selling strategy at Amazon, right? There had been the Z shops, there had been auctions, both had failed. There was a ton of naysayers, not just external naysayers, but internal naysayers. Remember, eBay was 3 times our size at that point, and everything, right? And it took real gall for Bezos to go, nope, we're going to stick at this. I believe in the strategy. I may not have the right mechanisms in place yet. And he created a dedicated pirate ship team to do this. And we had resistors internal to Amazon relative to doing this. But he gave us the isolation and the mission and his personal engagement to be successful at this. So that's another part of this. But success wasn't like overnight. It was really the combination of the marketplace business with Prime, with FBA, Fulfillment by Amazon 3 years later, and then patience, let the customers come along, let selection fill in. And it was really in 2008 when the marketplace business took off. And coincidentally, that's when Amazon stock took off. Amazon stock was flat for 8 years. And so the lesson from this is that incremental improvement tends to be predictable and everything. But these major discoveries, it's more like guided wandering, right? Like you have to have it's not randomized wandering, but you have to understand it may not be as predictable a path, but it's so worth it. Like the gains on these things is 100x what it takes. And so you just have to understand it's fundamentally a different game you're playing. You need a different playbook, a different belief system, a different way of leading them. That's what we tried to capture in Big Bet Leadership, was a leadership operating model for that type of challenge.
That's great advice. I like that distinction too, that your business as usual versus something like this big transformation, it is going to need a different framework. It's going to need a different type of leadership. It's going to probably need a different timeline. And so whatever that big transformation is for CS teams, whether it is using AI as part of your customer experience or whatever else they've changed, I think that's really, really helpful advice.
And if you don't have the humility up front to recognize, because you're a leader, right? You've been successful. But if you don't have the humility to recognize, the type of management systems and things I've learned along the way, this situation is fundamentally different. Like, it is a different theater that I am going to be operating in here, and I better go learn some things about it. Like, you are going to repeat the mistakes that thousands of companies and leaders have made, and that's why these statistics of failure on transformation are so high, is because people don't have the fundamental humility to go learn and challenge their own thinking and approaches and experience.
Finally, John, what are your thoughts on the future of leadership in customer service, especially with so much technology changing these days?
It's no different for the belief in customer service as it is for any other functional role, or generally for executive leadership, which is, we tend to think that digital disruption is like, Blockbuster and Xerox and, these classic stories of digital disruption. It's happening today, and it is happening faster. So here's a few gold standard brands who are suffering their version of disruption, right? So listen to this set of brands: Nike, Intel, Boeing, Starbucks. Like those are category leaders who are suffering their version of disruption. And it's a combination because A, they suffer from the ABCs of corporate decay: arrogance, bureaucracy, complacency, and they're short-termism, right? They're always trying to optimize for this quarter versus making the investments and making bold moves for the future. And so my fundamental belief is that you need a portfolio of resource allocation. And while most of it is going to be oriented towards today's operating business and the incremental projects you need to do, you need to have some thoughtful amount that is kind of the next horizon, the next operating model, the next customer experience model that is experimenting on these things. We wrap up the book with the simple advice of be an active skeptic, right? Both those words are important. Active means you engage in it. You apply resource to it. Skeptic means you don't believe everything you hear. You actually test things out before you commit to it. I think that is fundamentally what we have to do, is all be experimenters and be an active skeptic. You can't just ignore it, but you also just can't, bet big. Like, although the name of the book is Big Bet Leadership, fundamentally, the big is the ambition. By the time you're actually applying major resources or making commitments, you've tested out the biggest risks relative to this. And at that point, it's just a smart investment. It's no longer a bet.
That's really smart. I love that. Awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for joining us today. And again, the book is Big Bet Leadership. Thanks for the chat.
Bobby, great to meet you. Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at intercom.com/blog/newsletter to stay up to date with the latest trends in customer service and support. Make sure to check out our sister podcast, Intercom on Product, for insights into product design and development. You can find it on your preferred podcast platform or by visiting intercom.com/product podcast. You'll find all the links in the episode description. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time on The Ticket.